An Unusual Story by O.Henry. There stands a house near Abingdon Square. On the ground floor there has been for 25 years a little store where toys and stationery are sold. One night 20 years ago there was a wedding in the rooms above the store. The widow Maya owned the house and store. Her daughter Helen was married to Frank Barry. John Delaney was best man. Helen was 18 and very beautiful. Frank Barry and John Delaney were both young and handsome, and bosom friends. Both were in love with Helen, and wanted to marry her. When Frank won, John shook his hand and congratulated him. Honestly, he did. After the wedding ceremony, Helen ran upstairs to put on her hat. She was getting married in a traveling dress, and now she and Frank were going on honeymoon to the country. Downstairs, the crowd of guests were waiting to wish them pleasant trip. When Helen was putting on her hat before the mirror, there was a rattle of the fire escape, and through the open window jumped into her room the mad and infatuated John Delaney, and started telling her how greatly he loved her and entreating her to flee with him to the river or Bronx or any old place where there are Italian skies and dolce for night. Helen drastically repulsed him with blazing and scornful eyes. She asked him what he meant by speaking to respectable people that way. In a few moments she had tamed him. He bowed low and said something about irresistible impulse, and that he would forever carry and his heart the memory of, and she suggested that he catch the first fire escape going down. "I will go away," said John Delaney, "to the furthermost part of the earth. I can't remain here near you and know that you belong to another man. I will go to Africa, and there amid other sins strive to forget." "For goodness' sake get out," said Helen. "Somebody might come in." He knelt upon one knee and she gave him one white hand so that he might give it a farewell kiss. And then, of course, how did you guess it? The door opened and in comes the young husband. The farewell kiss was imprinted upon Helen's hand, and out of the window and down the fire escape sprang John Delaney, Africa bound. Imagine the scene, Frank white-hot, with the cry of a man wanted to death by jealous, Helen rushing and clinging to him, trying explain. He caught her hands and tore them from his shoulders. Never, they cried, would he look upon her face again, and rushed from the house through the staring groups of astonished guests. He never came back. 20 years passed. Mrs. Barry had inherited the shop and the house. At 38, she was still very beautiful, much more beautiful than many 18-year-old girls. Only a few people remembered her wedding comedy, so she made no secret of it. One day, a middle-aged, money-making lawyer, who usually came to her store to buy pens, paper, and ink, asked her across the counter to marry him. "I am really much obliged to you," said Helen cheerfully, "but I married another man 20 years ago. He has disappeared, but I think I still love him. I have never seen him since the wedding ceremony. Was it ink or pens that you wanted?" The lawyer bowed over the counter with old-time grace and left a respectful kiss on the back of her hand. Helen sighed, parting salutes, however romantic, and thought here she was at 38, beautiful and admired, and all that she got from her lovers were approaches and adieus. Worse still, in the last one she had lost a customer too. Business was not very successful, and Mrs. Barry was short of money. Finally she decided to prepare for desirable tenants. In the store window she hung out a card with said room to let. People come and rented the rooms and liked them, and when it was time for them to leave they were sorry, for the house of Mrs. Barry was a place of neatness, comfort, and taste. One day came Ramonti, a violinist, and engaged the front room above. Ramonti, with his still youthful face, his dark eyebrows, his short, pointed forehead, brown beard, his head of grey hair, and his light and pleasant manner, was a welcome tenant in the old house near Abingdon Square. Helen lived on the floor above the store. The architecture of it was unusual and attractive. The hall was large and almost square, up one side of it and then across the end of it, slanted an open stairway to the floor above. Helen had furnished this hall as a sitting room and office cabinet. There she kept her desk and wrote her business letters, and there she sat in the evening by a warm fire and a bright red light, and sewed or read. Ramonti found the atmosphere so agreeable that he spent much time there, describing to Mrs. Barry the wonders of Paris, where he had studied music. Tenant No. 2 was a handsome, melancholy man in his early forties, with a brown, miser's beard and strangely pleading eyes. He too found the society of Helen very desirable. With the eyes of Roman, he charmed her with tales of distant lands. From the first, Helen felt uneasy in the presence of this man. His voice somehow took her swiftly back to the days of her youth's romance. This feeling grew and led her to an instinctive belief that he had been a factor in that romance, and then with a woman's reasoning she was sure that her husband had come back to her, for she saw in his eyes love, which no woman can mistake, and regret and remorse which arouse pity. But she made no decision. A husband who walks around the corner and despairs for 20 years and then drops it again should not expect to find his slippers laid out conveniently, near no match ready, lighted for his cigar. There must be a long explanation and confessing his guilt, and then Maybe if he were properly humble, he might be forever forgiven. And so she made no sign that she knew or suspected. One evening, Romanti stopped in Helen Hall of Faye's reception room and told her of his love. His words were a bright flame of the divine fire that glows in the heart of a man who is dreamer and dark combined. But before you give me an answer, he went on, I must tell you that Romanti is the only name I can give you. My manager gave me this name. I do not know who I am or where I come from. My first relocation is of opening my eyes in a hospital. I was a young man and I had been there 4 weeks. I don't remember my life before that. They told me that I was found lying in the street with a wound on my head and was brought there in ambulance. They thought I must have fallen and struck my head upon the stones. There was nothing to show who I was. I have never been able to remember. After I was discharged from the hospital, I took up the violin. I have had success. Mrs. Barry, I do not. Now your name expects it. I love you. The first time I saw you, I realized that you were the one woman in the world for me. Helen felt young again. First a wave of pride went all over her, and then she looked Romanti in the eyes, and her heart began to beat violently. She hadn't expected that. It took her by surprise. The musician had become a big factor in her life, and she hadn't noticed it. Mr. Romanti, she said sorrowfully, I'm awfully sorry, but I'm a married woman. And then she told him the sad story of her life. Romanti took her hand, bowed low and kissed it, and went up to this room. Helen sat down and looked sadly at her hand. She had every reason to feel sad. 3 suitors had kissed it, mounted their steeds and ridden away. In an hour entered the mysterious stranger with the pleading eyes. Helen was in the armchair. 19-something. He ricocheted from the stairs and stopped for a chat, sitting across the table from her. He also told her of his love, and then he said, Helen, don't you remember me? I think I have seen it in your eyes. Can you forgive the past and remember the love that has lasted for 20 years? I offended you deeply. I was afraid to come back to you, but my love overpowered my reason. Will you forgive me? Helen stood up. The mysterious stranger held one of her hands in his. There she stood with a divided heart. The fresh, unforgettable, original love for her bridegroom was alive. The treasure, sacred, honored memory of her first choice filled half her soul, but the other half of her heart and soul was filled with something else, a later, fuller, nearer influence, and so the old fought against the new. And while She hesitated. From the room above comes the sweet, soft music of a violin. This music and the musician called her, and at her side honor and the old love held her back. "Forgive me," he pleaded. 20 years is a long time to remain away from the one whom you say you love. She declared. I am sorry," he begged. "I will conceal nothing from you. That night when he left followed him, I was mad with jealousy. On a dark street I struck him down. He did not rise. I examined him. He had tracked a stone. I did not intend to kill him. I was made with love and jealousy. I hid nearby and saw an ambulance take him away. Also, you married him, Helen. Who are you?" cried two women with wide open eyes. "Don't you remember me, Helen, the one who has always loved you best? I'm John Delaney, if you can forgive." But she was gone, running, stumbling, hurrying, flying up the stairs toward the music and him who had forgot but who had known that she belonged to him in each of the two existences. And as they climbed up, she sobbed, cried, and sang, "Frank, Frank, Frank!"